Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Culture Matters, our interview with Tony Munday from the UK. Welcome, Tony. And
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Kelly Byrnes here with Kathy Holmes.
Hi, Kathy Holmes here.
Hey. We're happy to welcome Tony from the UK. And Tony's from Hemel Hempstead, which is about 25 miles northwest of London. And his town was granted its original charter by King Henry VIII in 1539. So long history. He looks like he's living on the beach, but he's from a town in London. And Tony and I met via Biz Catalyst 360, where we're both writers. And we had through LinkedIn, had an exchange and a conversation a few months ago. And he shared this wonderful story about leadership and culture and trust and all these wonderful characteristics that apply to so many people that we talk with in our Culture Matters monthly forum, and that we see on LinkedIn, and that we just have so many different conversations with people about. So I invited Tony to come on today, and well, we're not going to really interview him so much as I just asked him to please share the story so it could be shared broader with more people. So Tony, if you want to share a little bit about your background first, that would be great.
Wonderful.
Great. Excuse me. Thanks, Kelly. And hello to everybody. So in brief, I had 34 years service in one of the police organisations in the UK, and I achieved a senior level. So I had a lot of operational responsibility and leadership. And in essence, I've reframed my leadership expertise for private clients, for my...
Oh, did he freeze, or is that me?
I think he froze. Can you see me?
I can see you. Oh.
Consultancy.
There he is.
What?
Technology. Gotta love technology.
Yeah. Hold on, Tony. You froze for a second there. So we're gonna keep rolling, but
we're gonna roll. We just roll with it.
Yeah. We'll post his LinkedIn profile so you can get all of the details about his background. But he's been doing leadership consulting and really just been a student of leadership and a practitioner for his whole career. 34 years, I think you said, with the UK, with the police force. And his story is related to that, this one experience that he shared. So Tony, take it away and share the story, please.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly, and to Kathy. So in essence, the police in the UK are very wedded to what we call command and control type of leadership. In other words, do as I say because I'm a higher rank than you, do as I say because this is what we do, or just do as I say because I'm telling you. And that was and remains primarily the key culture of leadership in the police in the UK. Now, back in around 1998, when I was a new inspector, one of the parts of the professional development was to offer us an accreditation with an external consultancy for an executive diploma in leadership. So, I grabbed that with both hands, as did a lot of colleagues. Anyway, one module which will relate to what we talked to today really intrigued me because I didn't really understand what it meant, and it actually was coaching as a leadership culture. So we had our meeting, our group, our syndicate, and there were some 30 inspectors there, including myself. And then the facilitator explained a little bit about coaching. In essence, I couldn't use any of the command and control comments that I described earlier. It was all about connectivity in an authentic sense with the person in front of me. So if you picture the scene, there was 30 inspectors in a semicircle in this big room, syndicate room. I was asked to play an inspector, which I was able to do, and a colleague was chosen, and also another inspector, to be a person who was a poor performer but very reluctant to admit it. Now, I realized that he'd been chosen for a reason, because he's a friend of mine, and he was a high performer, right? So he really hated any suggestion of being a poor performer, and he really got into it. So the room essentially disappeared, and it was myself and my friend. So all things like active listening, all the NLP aspects. Incidentally, as a former detective, I discovered that NLP techniques were a lot of what we used as a detective, but I didn't know it was called NLP. So it's all concentrating on him, his responses, and in the end, we achieved that goal without me using any of the command and control commands. He accepted that he was a poor performer and wanted help. And then it was stopped. The facilitator said that she was, clearly I was an experienced interrogator, to use her words, as she knew I'd been a detective. And I said, well, I prefer interviewer. Interrogation, brings up other views for me. Anyway, it was a really hot day. So with my colleague, because we then broke, everyone broke to give prior to giving feedback, we went outside. And he really was in role, and he was just kept saying, time out, I've got to have a break. So once he'd calmed down, I said, tell me what it was like. And he said, it was like being in a funnel that was closing in as a result of exactly what I said. You were clearly absolutely listening what I said, how I said it, what I wasn't saying, so that my avenues of escape were removed. But the most important, if you like, takeaway I got from that was the critical importance of connecting with him as a person. So a short while later, I was posted to Watford, I think, which is the home of Universal Studios.
Yay! Harry Potter.
Yeah. Exactly. So in Hertfordshire Police, which is my organisation, it was effectively a metropolitan area, so it was extremely busy. So I was posted to a response team. So that's the 999 24/7 teams. Okay, and there was 5 teams to cover the 24/7, and the team I was awarded had always been historically bottom of the pile. When I say bottom of the pile, the police, and they're still wedded to target culture, numbers, quantities, all that type of stuff, but that's how teams were evaluated, and as an inspector, that's what I would be dealing with. So their reputation preceded them, shall we say. So I knew the departments that collated the data that would relate to those targets. So these were people who'd known me for a period of time in the police, so I could trust their judgment. So I actually went to them, I told them all I was taking responsibility for this team. That's a term I always use in leadership. Rather than command, I talk about taking responsibility for a team. They all said good luck with that, and then I said, right, tell me about the poor performers in the team. Now, when I say poor performer, I don't mean inexperienced, anything like that. I mean people who are willfully, toxically poor. So I went through 7 or 8 different departments who collated different bits of data, things like arrests, stop and search, things like that. And basically there was about 6 constables and 4 of the sergeants. Now the team I had responsibility for was about 8 sergeants and 80 constables, covering the borough of Watford and then 3 Rivers district. So I had a separate one-to-one with each of these people, asked them their view of the world. Invariably it was rosy, and I said, well, sadly we both know that isn't the case, and I explained why. So I said, you've got a very simple choice now, because how I want to lead this team is entirely different from the previous inspector, who, as I would describe it, indulgently micromanaged them. In other words, sent incessant emails, did one-way briefings. So there was no there's no ownership by anybody. And so I explained that things would be different, and I explained how it would be different, and part of that would be about people taking responsibility. Now, as it happened, 3 of the sergeants and 2 of the constables decided to stand their ground, shall we say. So in an appropriate way, they were off-boarded, because, you know, from my perspective, and I followed it every time I took on new responsibilities, it was critically important to authentically evaluate the people I had responsibility for. You've got to deal with the toxic performers first before you do what I call the nice stuff, the proactive stuff, because they will bring you down, and that wasn't going to happen. And so what then had to happen is, I didn't want to deliver the message, because there's a famous 60s phrase, isn't it? The medium is the message. And it had to be delivered personally by me. Now, because of the geographical spread and the time-based nature of the responsibility, it took about 3 weeks before I'd sat in front of everybody and explained how things were going to be. And what I talked about is I needed people to take personal responsibility for whatever was in front of them. So they also needed to record their rationale, in other words, why they were doing a particular activity, make arrest, save life, or whatever it is, based on the information they had at the time. Now, why that was important was that the previous regime, there was what I call an upwards negative flow of requests for assistance, requests to make decisions. So failing to make decisions is a really powerful way to actually destroy an organisation when it goes upwards, that people aren't actually taking responsibility. Now, the other aspects that then came out from the team, because they knew this, was that they said, well, we're going to be hung out to dry. Sorry, that's an English or British phrase.
We know that one too.
Oh yeah,
okay.
we use that.
All
Yeah,
right,
perfect.
okay. Right, sorry. Right, so again, British, or particularly English, like to use words in a very ironic way. So still to this day, in every policing area, there's a 9 o'clock intelligence meeting, 9 in the morning. And it's affectionately known as morning prayers. Okay, now what it's supposed to be is an evaluation of the preceding 24 hours, what's been happening. But in reality, you have a whole group of people who are hell-bent on making a name for themselves by actually rubbishing operational officers who've made decisions under difficult circumstances. It's a horrific culture. So all the feedback I was getting was, well, if we do X, Y, Z, we're going to get it in the neck. Sorry, it's another colloquial. Right, okay. So I said, no, that's my responsibility. And I said, I've spoken to my peers and my more senior officers, and I've said, any issue with my team must come to me. I don't want people bothered. So that needed to be embedded. So we started on that, and then we started on a range of activities after that. So about 3 or so months after they fully appreciated that I meant what I said, I then said, right, you guys actually know the processes and aspects of our work that are preventing you being effective, because the people who do the job actually know this stuff. So I said, what I'd like is for the sergeants with their constables, so you have an organisation where different sergeants line manage particular officers. So test it out, pilot it. If it works, come back to me, we'll put it across the team. If it works, then we'll put it across the boroughs. So after about 6 months, we were actually 3rd in the table. Then I thought that had been embedded well. So then I said, and it was something I'd learned from studying Kaizen, the Japanese principle of continuous improvement, everyone's responsibility. And I said, right, we can now move on to the next level. What good ideas have you got that would benefit ourselves, but most importantly, the public, the people we're actually here to deal with. And then they took that on. And then, so after a year, we were actually top in those terms, performing team. But the interesting aspect was, at no time did I ever refer to those numerical based targets. It wasn't that at all. What it was actually to engage and energize the team into developing and understanding that they were trusted. They had the equipment, in terms of resources, or experience or skill. If they didn't, they asked, and then they got those additional resources. So what it then became was actually quite wonderful, is that it became a pleasure to go into work. So you can imagine, as an inspector in a busy police area, it almost sounds a bit bizarre. How can you enjoy going to work when you don't know what you're facing? Well, that's true. But when I knew that everybody was doing their best, then that was a really good start. And that's what happened. And also, I think there's some other aspects that link into this, in that it's really always critically important, I believe, to really understand your team as people. So as a police officer, we're almost an actor, in the sense that we put on a uniform or a suit if we're a detective, but that's not who we actually are. We're fulfilling a function for periods of time. So I happen to be so as the Americans call it, a soccer fan. So so they knew the team I supported, and things like that. And we got to know, birthdays and things like that. But also, as they clearly responded well to my trust, I then developed other areas of trusting them. So, for example, because of the positioning of Hertfordshire, the costs of houses are really, really expensive. And so a lot of police officers live good distances away from, the areas that they police. So quite often that means that, they need to get their cars serviced. Now, sometimes that could mean that their car is serviced when they should be at work, if it's a day shift or a late shift. So what I said is, I prefer it if they actually told me that they needed to get their car serviced. Once it was serviced, come into work. Now, the reason for that was that, first of all, we'd built up a culture of trust where they knew that their mates were doing a bit more because they weren't there. But equally, if I'd have either said no or they didn't trust me, they could have just gone sick and I'd have lost them for the whole shift. So it was very, very important to do that. And then some of the other aspects which came out of that, first of all, on that team, because I was there for 3 years, I think, as I'd said, and for that 3 years we were top of the charts, if you will. But also, I think it was about understanding my responsibility as a leader to facilitate the development of those I was responsible for. And that included developing people laterally, but also developing them off the team. Whereas a lot of other colleagues kept them what are called golden handcuffs. So they would get a high performing officer, whether it's a sergeant or a constable, and they would almost in a real sense keep hold of them as though they were personal property, because that made them look good. Well, I didn't subscribe to that at all. And obviously over the years, I then got feedback from colleagues who'd developed in different ways that was much appreciated. But one of the I suppose one of the areas that was really quite interesting for me was that the aspect of me seeing those of my team as a person and how it came back to me was quite interesting. That so in the UK we have a great habit of drinking tea, wherever we can. Okay, so the first time it happened, I was really quite dumbstruck. So I happened to be in my office dealing with whatever I was dealing with, and then there was a knock on the door, and then someone just said boss. So that's a colloquialism for a senior officer, and it could be said in different ways, but it was said in the right way. Yes, it's been a busy shift. Do you fancy a cup of tea? no, I thought that was absolutely amazing. You know, they weren't being obsequious or anything like that. This was real human connectivity. And then probably a wider example of that I could come to, you know, related to, yeah, sadly, a murder. So would you like to hear about that, Kelly?
I remember this story too.
Okay, so it was a really hot day, as these things always seem to be. It was about 10 to 6 in the evening, and we were that was myself, firearms officers, because UK police are basically unarmed, so you have special units that are armed. We're actually outside an address, ready to make what we call a hard entry, in other words, go in, because we'd found that the estranged husband of his wife had found out where her boyfriend was, and he was intent, and he'd just gone into the premises with a shotgun, which is clearly a serious incident. So that was just about to take place. So all the resources were in place, and then a guy in a t-shirt, shorts, and a little sausage dog came walking around the corner and just said, "Who's in charge here?" So I said, "Well, that would be me." And then he said, "I've just found the dead body of a girl round the corner." So I'd heard what he said, but I said, "Can you say that again?" And the reason I did that was, you know, a second of thinking time seems like an hour, but also I could then really study that person and make, you know, sure, as far as I could do, first of all, that they were being authentic, and he was. So one of my sergeants was there, and they dealt with the firearms incident because it was all about to take place. Everything had been deployed. So he went a short, yeah, about half a mile, and then in this park that was nearby that I didn't even realise was there, yeah, very sadly, was the dead body of a girl with her dog. Obviously, lots of tensions, lots of pressures to, as we say, forensicate it, so make sure the scene was clear, all those sorts of things. So lots and lots of responsibilities. So it then got to about 10 to 9, so 8:50 p.m, and realised it was getting dark. So with the adrenaline of everything that was going on, nobody, and we'd had all my team effectively were in charge of cordons and doing various aspects to do with this job. No one had had anything to eat. So one of the sergeants had been a what we call a logist. So they were a policy logist. So they were recording my decisions. And so then I said to him, right, no one's had anything to eat. Right, so pop round, speak to everybody, and find out their individual order from McDonald's, because I actually knew the manager of the big McDonald's in Lower High Street in Watford. We dealt with some incidents, so we weren't unfamiliar to each other. And he said, well, you know, can that work? So I said, well, hang on a sec. So I phoned the manager, and I said, I don't know the accountancy aspects of this. In other words, how we're going to code all of this help. But, you know, can you provide food for about 50 people? And I said, well, you know, I'll take responsibility for sorting out the bill. Yeah, ultimately, even if I have to pay it myself. And he said, no, there's absolutely no charge. So I said, thanks. So then the sergeant said, right, let's just all, you know, I'll order a number of Big Macs, fillet. I said, no, you're absolutely not listening. And I said, I want you to go to everybody, record their name, what their individual order is, and then come back to me. All right, because we've got to actually demonstrate that we take notice of what people have done, because it can be very boring, etc. So he did. Anyway, and the short aspect of that, the PS, if you will, is yeah, probably a couple of years ago, I happened you know, to be in a cafe, a Starbucks, and then one of the officers who was on that job came up to me, and it was nothing to do with the fact that, you know, we arrested the murderer and that type of thing. He said, you may not realize it, he said, but, you know, what you did was thinking about our individual needs, you know, was like getting a pay rise. He said it showed that we weren't, you know, even if you'd just got burgers, that would have been better than nothing. But the fact that you insisted that our individual needs were important really struck home. And then it's a little bit emotional, actually. He then, in a public Starbucks, then shook my hands. He said, I've wanted to do that, for about 10 years. So all of this is, for me, the fundamentals of leadership is absolutely knowing your people. When I say your people, those you've got responsibility for as people. So that's, if you like, my philosophy, if we could say that.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, so great. Thank you so much, Tony. And so much beef, if we use the McDonald's, so much beef in the whole story.
Thank you.
The McDonald's example at the end shows, though, the integrity of know your people, because some leaders will care about the people on their birthdays, but then when a tough time comes along, then all of a sudden they don't really care. They don't really pay attention to the individual as a person. And like the guy said, getting a bag of burgers would have been fine. That would have been nice. And a lot of people don't even do that. That would have been appreciated too. But the extra effort really showed something special, and that's a memorable. He remembered it, a burger 10 years later. That's really nice.
This story resonates so much to me with respect to just when you entered the organization and talking about taking responsibility was a key thing. Not only did you ultimately expect it for others, you demonstrated that, which I think is really a wonderful part of this story as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
It shows true, really leadership, and in particularly with the type of work you do, which can be very have a lot of psychological impact, and having a place to go for trust is huge.
Yes. I mean, I had a little phrase for that. I said that my responsibility was to create an oasis of calm, because that's very visual. So I can't use the term madness because that's a bit disrespectful, but there's so much goes on in policing. I mean, it's not quite as was Hill Street Blues, but it's probably not far off, because you literally, as a police officer, do not know really what's going to happen from one minute to the next, when you're going to have to make really big decisions. So the cohesion of the team, can't be developed, with the crack of a bullwhip or just shouting at people. Because police officers have had their individual legal responsibilities, but it's actually about getting a cohesive team. And the way to do it and to make it enjoyable is actually to know your people. Absolutely, to know your people. And so, a couple of things, that helped me in leadership, and then when I'm speaking with clients, is these two things. So number one is that leadership is absolutely not about being the best at everything and knowing everything. Now, for some reason, that's the pressure people put on themselves. But the second aspect is that, I consider it's, one of my little catchphrases, if you will, is that leadership is about knowing ourselves and those we're responsible for as people and behaving accordingly. Because the more critical, so in policing terms, let alone, in the world of commerce, is the more, probably put it this way, the more stressful the scenario, the calmer the leader has to be. Calmer, CALM. Because if you don't process things in the right way, you don't deliver the message in the right way, you don't listen, and that's absolutely the other aspect of there's very few times, and that the murder I described was what I would say when prescriptive leadership is required. We can't have a debate about something as serious as that, but that's actually quite rare. And in the military in the UK, and I don't know if it happens in the US, but having been in sort of the reserves previously, so it's something I picked up, is that before an assault or an operation, the senior officer will get what they call an O group. So it's all the people together from the lowliest private to, whoever's there, sergeants, corporals, etc., captains, and say, right, anybody got any ideas about how we can best achieve this mission? So you absolutely distill expertise, because a leader cannot know it all. And as well as it feeling good to be asked, is people actually have things to say, and so it actually really, creates such a wonderful culture. And it's not weakness and it's not softness, to be polite, to be humane. And one of probably why this this has struck with me was, and I'll take advice from Kelly if she wants me to talk about it, was my very first day as an acting sergeant. So my very first stint of being a supervisor. So would that be relevant, do you think?
Well, we're going to have to save that for a part 2, I think, because we're
okay, that's a part two.
I think we got part 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So
yeah.
Okay. So
sure. But
wait for the next exciting episode.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
so
and I love, I now get the screensaver on the Oasis of Calm that you've created. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, thank you.
And certainly if this is relevant in the police department, in the high stress environment that the police have, and that's certainly relevant in the business environment and in other organizations that aren't under life and death situations all the time, and that aren't making those kind of quick decisions in matters that are so personal for the people involved in life and death and that kind of thing. Certainly these takeaways are relevant to them as well. And I appreciate the leadership philosophies of it's not always about being the only one that knows everything, or the one that knows everything or has all the answers, or but it is about knowing yourself and knowing others and acting accordingly. And that was your second one. And then the more stressful the situation, the more calm the leader needs to be. And, if you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, do you know that saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're running around or you're stressed out and emotional or angry or upset, if you're all emotional, you're not going to inspire wise decision making by other people that you're trying to influence, and you're not going to cause others to believe that you've made wise decisions either. So all three of those philosophies are so important. So Anthony, thank you so much for sharing, or Tony, thank you so much for sharing all of those.
Oh, my pleasure.
Kathy, any last minute comment?
No, I think you summed it up really nicely, Kelly. And just, I really appreciate the story that you've shared with us, Tony. It's very valuable.
Oh, thank you very much.
To a lot of a wide audience, leaders, and particularly in public service as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And I as soon as I was coming out with the colloquialism, I suddenly thought, oh, I just better check. So yes. Apologies.
Oh, no, that all fit in too. And Tony has a book coming out in the next few months that we'll connect you with as well when it's available. The Essential Heart of a Leader. So I can't.
Yeah, I'm excited to read that.
Enough. It's fantastic. So, thank you again, Tony. And we will get this up for everyone soon. So I'm going to end the video and then we can all chat for a minute. So thank you for watching Culture Matters.
Thank you for, yes.